Hey guys, welcome back. This is the Jedi Council, Young Jedi CCG YouTube channel. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Appreciate all the views and comments. So today I've got another deck tech video for you today. Our last video we featured a Boss Nass deck that was from the end of Decipher meta. And today we're going to feature what I believe is the top dark side deck from the end of the Decipher meta. And that is Watto Pod Racing. So just going to walk through this deck with you and explain it a little. This one might be a little longer just so I can explain a little bit about pod racing and how it works, because I'd say this is probably the most complicated competitive young Jedi deck to play. But I'll walk you through it as we go, and hopefully can give you a nice brief deck tech here without getting too bogged down in the weeds. So first off, we have our red dot. Our red dot is overall, in terms of gameplay, fairly inconsequential. We're playing 9 copies of the Neimoidian Aid. This can be any Neimoidian. I chose the Coruscant one just because I like this one. But the key part is that this is a 1 deploy, non-unique character that is a 5 destiny. And you'll see why that is critical later on. And it's just that we don't have good options in the red dot, but this will end up being good just because it's something we can always throw down to the table, and it only takes 1 counter. And then you'll see as we go through our pod racing part that 5 is our handling number, so that's a wild card for the race. So having 9 copies of that we can throw down is great. And then those do get cycled back into the deck, so since it's a good destiny, that is favorable as well. Then we do have 1 copy of our wild Watto the Risk Taker. So that's our red dot. Then our blue dot is probably pretty predictable for you guys, but it is 9 copies of Watto the Pod Race Sponsor. Again, I've been working on these decks for a long time, so these are actually all fully foiled out. So we do have 9 foil copies of the Pod Race Sponsor here. Now, the key thing about this particular Watto is he does receive 2 power bonus when any of your pod racer pilots has fought or thrusted this turn. So you'll see we don't have any pod racer pilots that will actually ever fight, but we do have 1 that will be on Boon to Eve Classic thrusting on each of our turns. So that's important to remember. That's going to be a bonus on your turn. It won't kick in on your opponent's turn because you only thrust during your own deploy phase, not during your opponent's. But obviously this is just an absolute beast at the desert landing site, because he's going to be 3 for himself, 2 for the site, 2 for the bonus. So just off of his own card, he's going to be a 7. Then he'll be 9 with the effect, 11 plus a destiny with the weapon. So to get an 11 plus a destiny character for 2 deploy bars is just crazy. So we're going to play our full 9 of those. I still do like the enhanced Watto better than that, just because the enhanced Watto only costs 1, which is absolutely crazy, and he's at 6 destiny. So I still do prefer an enhanced Watto over that. So we do run 1 more enhanced Watto out of the blue dot. Let me see if I can adjust these lights. It seems like it's really glaring off of that there, but see if that helps a little bit. Not tremendously, but well, let's get onto our green dot. Like I said, you won't need to see that too much because you know what it is. Then the green dot is a little more variety. First green dot character we're going to run that's very key to our strategy is 3 Rum Slegs. So Rum Sleg is the dark side version of Walled. He lets you deploy any character, or I should say, lets you take into hand any character from your draw deck. And that can be different when you're pod racing, because you can always play that down to the table and then take a card into your hand that you would like to use for the pod race. So taking stuff into your hand actually is very good with pod racing. Then we have Rake the Sun. the Arms Smuggler. We have 2 copies of that, and he gives us a weapon. So he's going to give us our data screens, or also obviously our pod racer. And then Arlie Rue, the freelance pilot, 2 of those. He gives us our starships. That's very critical for an evacuation attempt. And we have 1 copy of Madoon to get us a battle card. So kind of the full Anakin's Friend package there. And then the unique thing here is 1 copy of Mars Guo Pod Racer Pilot. So I mentioned 5 is our handling number. That is determined by the collector number. The last digit of the collector number is how you determine the handling. So that was kind of a weird thing to do instead of just putting, they didn't reprint these. They just said use the original ones and just use the collector number. I would have thought, just reprinting them with a handling number right on them or something would have been cool, but they didn't do that. So this is your Pod Racer Pilot. That's going to be deployed to Boonta Eve Classic. And lastly, again, 1 more enhanced Watto out of that green dot. So that's our character selection there. There's our 30 characters. For the orange weapon dot, we have Watto's data pad. That's going to be our key weapon there. And we run 6 of those. Again, we would, typically run a full 9 or 10, but you'll see why we're diversifying that a little bit here. And that is that we're going to run 3 Tatooine backpacks. So that'll function as a data pad if you need it to by just discarding it. But importantly, that backpack will also function as Mars Guo's pod racer, should you need that. So that's the package there for weapons. And then when we get to our yellow dot battle cards and effects, we do run 3 copies of Eventually You'll Lose. That's Watto's effect. And then this, again, is a big sleeper card, I think. 7 copies of You Have Been Well Trained / After Her. This is huge in this deck because this turns Watto into a fight together deck. So just like, Destroyer Droids or Coruscant Guards or any of those types of decks, except for Watto's just going to be fighting with himself. And so that's just obviously a huge fight. I already mentioned, at the desert landing site, a single Watto is an 11 power. You add on another 9 fighting with himself, you get up to 20 plus a destiny using You Have Been Well Trained. Obviously broken too, because just drawing it for destiny, it's always a 5, never a 1, unless there's something very weird happening, like change in tactics or something. But the other thing for this particular deck is that the 1 destiny is key for pod racing. So you can use that, and it does not count as one of your handling numbers because you can race the 1 as a 1. And then also it's a wild handling number using the 5 if you need it. So that's just a huge card for racing. And then also because it is an effect, you can call that up at the start of any planet. Even if you're just going to throw it down and use it in a pod race, you can call that up at the start of any planet. So having 7 of those just really smooths out everything you try to do, and keeps your Wattos alive, makes it so it's going to be very hard for your opponent to get a planet victory when you're fighting those Wattos together. And you'll see if this game stalls out any bit at all, you're just going to win the pod race, actually. So that's the nice thing about this deck. It can win by fighting or it can win by racing. And then the final dot here, the purple dot, pretty standard, is we've got our 3 Viceroy's battleships for evacuations. We've got Darth Maul's Starfighter and 2 Sith Infiltrators. I do choose to, usually I play Droid Starfighters, but I choose to go with the Sith Infiltrators in this deck again because it's got our 5, our handling number there. And then our locations, of course, is the Desert Landing Site, the Galactic Senate, and the Gungan Swamp. So really the only one of those that we care about, obviously, is the Desert Landing Site. So we have those. And lastly, very important for this deck, of course, is our objective card, which is the enhanced out of the purple dot, is the Boonta Eve Classic. I'll do a separate video on full how to pod race, but the strategy with this is with this particular deck, because you're only got one pod racer and one pilot. So you got to get one of those cards down onto Boonta Eve Classic before you can even start the race. So what'll happen most oftentimes is you wait till your first face-up deploy to be able to do this. And I would say it's going to happen one of two ways. Is either you're at your opponent's planet and they put a dominant show out and you just use your face-up deploy to get a pod racer pilot and then just forfeit the planet. Or if you get to go first and you choose Tatooine, you can afford a little bit of a setback and still to stay alive on Tatooine, because Watto is going to be very strong there. So if you win the draw, I would say you go first and go for Tatooine. But if your opponent wins the draw, you pretty much just let them have their first planet and set up your pod racer while they do that. And in terms of how do you set up your pod racer, I'll give you a little detail on that bit. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to have 10 cards in your deck which represent the pod racer. Of course, you have Mars Guo himself and his pod racer. Those are the obvious ones. But then you have the 3 Tatooine backpacks will represent the pod racer, as well as 3 Rum Slegs, who will get the pod racer pilot, or 2 Rake Thasans, who will get the pod racer. So you've got your 5 friends, your 2 backpacks, Mars Guo, and his pod. So any of those 10 cards, you just need 1 copy of any of those 10 cards, and that will get you your pod racer. Like I said, it's going to need to be on a face-up deploy for everything except Mars Guo and the pod racer. If you get Mars Guo or the pod racer, you can start the race immediately, right away on your first turn. But most often, you're going to be face-down deploying something, and then flipping face up on your second turn and using a Rum Slag, a Rake Thasan, or a Tatooine backpack to pull that. So that's how you get the race started. Once you get the race going, like I said, you got a great ability to use handling numbers here. You've got your whole red dot is 5s. Your weapons are all 5s. You usually try not to use weapons, though, just because they're good to actually get. Battle cards obviously are fantastic for racing, as are a few of your starships here. So you got a great number of handling numbers. You can use 3 of those wild handling numbers per lap. And it's also a nice way to get card selection too, because you can deploy something and then race, and then when you're done racing, you get to do what's called a refuel. And a refuel basically will draw you, roughly how it works is half the number of cards you play. So if you're up to a 4 thrust and you play 4 race cards, you get to actually draw 2 new cards. So it's kind of like a discard 2 to draw 1 type of effect. And it's a little better than that because when you round up. So if you have 1 thrust, it's discard 1 to draw 1. If you have 3 thrust, it's discard 3 to draw 2. So it is, and when I say discard, I just mean, you're playing cards to your lap pile. But like I said, I'll cut it off here because I don't want to get too much in depth about pod racing. I'll do a separate video specifically on how to pod race. But like I said, again, the best way to summarize this is what is fantastic about this deck is I'd say it's the best fighting deck on the dark side, but it also very easily can pod race and win that way just by accident. Because if your opponent doesn't, wipe you out completely, you're going to win the pod race before someone loses by a deck victory typically. So, and that's even the case where, a typical game might be you forfeit the first planet to them, they forfeit the second planet to you, and then you sit out and duke it out on the third planet. And while you're duking it out, you're going to win the pod race. So to win the pod race, it's going to take you, I believe it's 5 or 6 turns total. Because let's see, you do 1, 2, 3. So that'd be 3 turns, and then it's 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's 6 turns. 6 turns will will win you the pod race. If you don't miss a single lap card, it takes you 6 turns. So yeah, if you played Young Jedi, 6 turns can be a lot. So you don't want that to be your only focus. But most games go well beyond 6 turns if if you're familiar. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the pimped out deck here. I don't know if this is something that because again, this is right after the game died, and I don't know how well known this deck is, but just from my knowledge of the meta, I'd say this is the kind of the best dark side strategy that's out there. And then this was also the inspiration of the current world champion deck too. He elected not to race. Like I said, there's a lot more involved if you want to try to pod race, but you could literally play this same deck and just drop all the pod racing out of it, and it'd still be a competitive fighting deck, still be a top tier fighting deck. That's what's crazy. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more.